Thanks so much. If there's one thing that we have learned in the last years of the economic crisis is that we cannot simply bail ourselves out of a crisis. We cannot simply stimulate our way out of a crisis, and we cannot just print money our way out of a crisis. But we can do a lot better in giving more people better skills to collaborate, compete, and connect in ways that drives our economies forward. Skills have become the currency of 21st century economies. They drive success. They are the foundation of our success. And without skills, people languish on the margins of society. Technological progress doesn't translate into economic growth, and countries simply cannot compete in this hyper-connected world. But that's the theory. Then we see millions of unemployed graduates on the street, and employers saying they cannot find the people with the skills they need. And that tells us that skills just don't automatically translate into better lives, better jobs, and so on. The relationship between skills and education is actually not that simple. Think a lot about the last CV that you posted to your employer. No? It probably made reference to lots of certificates and qualifications that you got at some stage in your life. No? But what do those qualifications actually say about what you can do now, today? No? Take me as an example. You know, I did my degree in physics, no? But since 25 years I work in the field of education. If you put me in a laboratory today, probably I'm going to do a terrible job because the field of physics has evolved so fundamentally, and because I've lost many of the skills that I didn't use. But I've also learned a lot of things in the field of education that doesn't show up in my physics degree. So what are our degrees really telling us about the skills that we have? How do employers know which skills are available? How do people know which skills are actually needed? We found an innovative way to actually look into this. With our new survey of adult skills, it's the first of its kind effort actually to test the skills that adults have. Essentially, we went to thousands of homes across 24 industrialized countries, and we tested people for their skills in literacy, numeracy, problem solving. And then we linked that information with how people actually use their skills and what benefits they get out of this. Here are some results. The first thing we found is that what people know and what people do with what they know has a major impact on their life chances. You see that highly skilled adults are twice as likely to be employed and almost 3 times as likely to earn an above median wage than people at the bottom end of the skill distribution. In short, poor skills severely limit people's access to good and well-paying jobs. Highly skilled people are also more likely to volunteer and to see themselves as actors in political processes rather than as objects of political process. People with better skills are even more likely to trust others. So trust isn't just about, you know, where you were brought up and the people you live with. It has to do with your skills. And that tells us that we can actually do something about it. And that's important, because without trust in public institutions, you know, public support for ambitious and innovative policies is going to be very, very hard to mobilize, because often you may need to make short-term sacrifices and the benefits come uncertain and over the long term. There are a lot of real challenges for people. So in the end, fairness, inclusiveness, integrity, they're all about the skills that citizens have. And it works the same for nations. It's actually very interesting. This chart shows you that greater inequality in skills on the horizontal axis relates to greater inequality in income on the vertical axis. Think about that. The way our skills are distributed relates to how nations share their wealth. Of course, there are many ways how you can enhance social equity. You can use taxes to take money away from the rich and give it to the poor and so on. But that's all about dealing with the symptoms. What you see here is one of the major sources of inequality in our societies. And where large shares of adults have poor skills, you know, we also are more, it's harder to introduce productivity enhancing technologies. People don't absorb it. And that too stalls improvements in living standards. So the case for skills is quite clear. So how do countries actually prepare their citizens? You can see the differences here. Roughly 1 in 5 adults in Japan and Finland perform at the highest level on our numeracy test. But in Italy and Spain, you can see just 1 in 20 adults perform. And more than 1 in 3 adults perform at or below what we call the really baseline level. Some countries do better in literacy than they do in numeracy. But overall, the picture is actually quite similar. You can see again Japanese and Finns around 6 years ahead of their Spanish and Italian counterparts. So where you live makes actually a real difference in terms of your skills. But I want to bring a second dimension into this picture, and I'm now going to compress that scale, and I'm adding how literacy skills are distributed within each country. That's the blue bar here. And what you can actually see is that skill gaps within countries are many times larger than the differences across countries. No? Even highly literate nations, no? Like Finland, have large liabilities in their talent pool, lots of people who struggle. In fact, at least 1 in 10 adults in the industrialized world doesn't make it beyond our baseline level of proficiency. Across the countries that took this test, that makes about 80 million adults that do not read as well as to what you expect from a 10-year-old child. Very, very large numbers. On top of that, in countries like the US, Poland, Germany, Italy, or England, a difficult social background translates directly into poorer skills in adulthood. We can look at the skills of nations in another way, in greater detail, looking not just at how countries do relative to each other, but what people can actually do. Here you can see the share of people, adults, who can solve basic sort of problems using digital technologies, navigating a web page and so on. And this is the share of adults who are really good at that. They can advance, sort of use multiple applications, deal with complex problems. There's a lot of hype about the digital age in which we live, but you look at these numbers and you can see it's just about 1/3 of adults that are comfortable in this digital world. I know what you're going to tell me now, well, this is all about older people being out of date and so on. It's all very different among the young people. No? But you can actually look at this. We tested that as well, and you can see, well, even among the younger generation, there are a lot of people out here not being comfortable with the digital world in which we live. Even among university graduates, only half actually do well on this problem-solving test in a technology environment. Does it matter? Actually, it does. When you look at this, at the evolution and employment by those kinds of problem-solving skills, you see that there has been a significant decline in the occupations with sort of middle-level problem-solving skills. There has been little change among people with very low problem-solving skills. But there has been rapid growth in employment among people who are great at solving problems using digital technologies. What you see here is actually what we call the hollowing out of our labor markets. Those who have great skills are fine. They're getting better and better. Those who are sort of most at risk are not the poorly skilled, but are sort of the white-collar middle-class workers, because their skills can increasingly be digitized, automated, and outsourced, and that's why they're losing their jobs. At the bottom end, you keep your job, but you earn less and less. Now, you can't sort of digitize your bus driver or outsource your hairdresser to India. So there are a lot of jobs that are quite stable, even if they're not very demanding in terms of people's skills. But this picture tells you how our world is actually changing. So the skills of people differ, and the talent pool of nations differ, and that all makes a difference. But those differences are not set in stone. That's a very, very important finding as well from our study. In fact, our data show that some countries have made impressive progress over successive generations. The red line is the average. The green line is the performance of 16 or 24-year-olds, young people. The pink line is the average of 55 to 64-year-olds. So you can actually see, younger people on average do better than older people on these kinds of skill tests. But look at how young Koreans do. No? That's the yellow diamond, you know. They are far ahead of their peers. And this is where older Koreans came from. They were among the lowest performing people. And you can see Korea has been able to add about 2 years of skills every decade to its entire population. You can also see Spain has moved from poor to adequate, or Finland has moved from good to great. Younger versus older. Countries like France, Germany also made some decent progress. No? But then you look at Norway and you can see actually the older generation actually does quite well, the younger generation falling behind. And you look at the US or the UK, no? Young Brits or American enter a much more demanding world with similar skills than their grandparents who are near their retirement. No? The talent pool of those countries is going to shrink dramatically over the next decades unless these countries succeed in dramatically improving the quality of education. And that, in fact, that's exactly what you see here. Among the people nearing retirement, no, that's here, you can see there are about 40% of the highly skilled being Americans. No? Every fifth person you meet, an American. Among those entering the workforce, it's just about below 30%. No? So our talent pool is changing. And that tells you that in a global economy, success is no longer just about becoming better by national standards. It's about doing better than others. It's about improving the fastest improving countries internationally. So how do we develop the right skills? As you would expect, formal education is still the major source of skills. But our data also show that literacy levels often differ markedly from what formal qualifications suggest. Look at this chart. This is the middle half of Italians who haven't completed school. And you can actually see their skills vary quite a bit. No? You compare this with those who have completed schools. They are doing better on average, but there's overlap. And you can see actually the bottom half of university graduates in Italy are not doing as well as the top half of school leavers. No? And you can compare that with Japan, you know, our top performer, and you can see the picture looks actually quite different. No? And then you can make comparisons across countries. You can see Japanese school leavers outperform Italian university graduates. No? Huge variability. No? Of course, there's a lot of reasons behind that. No? Simply, you know, you gain skills, you lose skills, whatever your qualifications. So there are reasons why why skills do not equate to qualifications. But this data also suggests that we need to take a much harder look at the value of qualifications. And some institutions and nations need to do better to tell young people the truth about the value of their qualifications, because they're going to find out the hard way when they hit the labor market. But the difficulty with formal education is, you know, you get a lot of it at the beginning, maybe more than you want, and then very little thereafter. Let me show you the most depressing results from our skills survey. You see the skills of people on the vertical axis and the age of people on the horizontal axis. No? And so this is how the picture looks for literacy skills and for numeracy skills. Oops. And you see why this is so depressing when you try to figure out where you are on the slide. No? You can see you're doing well at the beginning, but doing poorer and poorer as people grow older. You might think this is all to do with the fact, you know, that, well, people age and so on. There are biological factors and so on. It's about migration, older generations not having gained the same kind of quality of education that youngers get today. But even if you adjust for that, it actually looks the same or even worse. What is also interesting is, you know, another idea is, oh, it's about biology. You know, we get older, we forget more things, so we lose skills and so on. But if that would be the sole explanation, you would find the same picture across all countries, and we do not. There are some countries that are doing much better than others in retaining their skills. Now, the Nordic countries, the Netherlands, Canada, for example, have been a lot better than other countries in making lifelong learning a reality. They've developed adult education that is relevant to users and flexible. You can decide where you learn, how you learn, when to learn. They are very flexible in the delivery of content and how content is being delivered. They've made it adult learning, information on adult learning easy to find. You know, you can figure out where you can learn, how you learn. They've also made skills everybody's business with government, employers, people all working together on this. So there are huge differences across countries. Well, that's one side of the story, and it's surely important to have a country with lots of talented people, though. Clear. But it's actually just one side, and there's another side to the story. Skills are only valuable when you actually make good use out of them. So we measured actually how people use their skills. Reading, writing, numeracy, ICT, problem solving, and so on. And this is about the average skill use across countries. And what you see is now Americans didn't come out so well on this test. No? They didn't have the kind of great skills that we would want to. But compared to the average, they actually use the skills they have at work much better than others. And the economy extracts really good value from the skills that Americans have. Compare that with the Japanese, look at this. Oops. You can actually see the Japanese read, they write, but they don't solve many problems. No? Maybe they don't have any problems, but actually there is some very different patterns. Think about it. Here you have the country with the greatest talent, no? The most highly skilled nation. And yet the economy doesn't translate those skills into better jobs and better lives. No? And that's because there's a very rigid labor market that actually prevents many highly skilled people, particularly women, to actually make good use out of their skills. And those things actually do matter a lot, because our data show that differences in the average use of reading skills actually translate directly into labor productivity. And about 30% of the variation in labor productivity is explained by how people actually use their skills. Let me make one final point. We know that women tend to earn less than men, even if they have similar qualifications. And people have sort of speculated a lot and worked a lot on what actually drives those gender differences. The good thing is we now have data to actually understand those patterns a lot better. And it's not about the skills that people have. Actually, men and women come out quite similar on the skills test that we did. It's about how women and men use their skills. On the vertical axis, you see the wage differences in percentage points. On the horizontal axis, you see the percentage in the use of the problem-solving skills that we measured. And you can actually see that the gap is substantial. In some countries, about 30% or more wage differences in Japan or Estonia, for example. And now you can see that the use of skills, the differences between men and women, explains the wage differences to a fairly large amount. About half of the differences is explained by this. And we've been actually able to look further into this, what drives that relationship. And we found that gender differences in the use of skills are mainly due because men are more commonly employed in full-time jobs and in the kind of occupations that simply draws out better the kind of skills they have, even if they are not better skilled. And that's another piece of evidence why we need to do a lot better in making better use of the talent in our nations. And underuse of skills is not just a matter of women. It's also common among young and particularly foreign-born adults. People working in small enterprises, people taking part-time jobs, people working on temporary work. All those are situations where people's skills are not well used. To do better, we need a lot more coherent, easy to understand qualifications and degrees. They are not just about formal qualifications, but they recognize our learning throughout life. Where people lack skills, employers and people need to invest a lot better in developing relevant skills. We need to better integrate the world of work and the world of learning. We have school, we have work, but we don't bring those two together. And we know that learning at the workplace allows people to develop relevant skills, work in a real environment. Hard skills are modern equipment, and soft skills such as teamwork and negotiation in a real world environment. We're just not making good use out of this. We also need better experts with the latest labor market intelligence at their fingertips who can actually guide people to find the job that suits them best. And none of this is going to work unless skills become everybody's business, unless you have governments that provide education that offers the right skills to the right people, to everyone. Unless employers invest more in learning, and labor unions for that matter help actually to translate that learning into better quality jobs and actually better pay. And unless we take all a lot more responsibility for our own learning and use the opportunities that are available. None of that's easy, and people sometimes say that, changing public policy is like moving graveyards, you know. You just can't rely on the people out there to help you. But global comparisons like our skills survey show you what's possible. They take away excuses from those who are complacent. And they allow us to set meaningful targets in terms of measurable goals achieved by the most advanced public policies worldwide. And the bottom line is that without data, we're all just people with an opinion. Thank you very much.